When I first graduated from university or college, I was making around 60% more than the average graduate. In UK, the average graduate salary is 35k. I was making about 55 all in all combined. It was really cool, it was my first job out of college. I worked in strategy consulting, which is typically a field that pays a lot higher than other industries. In the last year, I've since quit my job. I've built my own AI startup. I'm working on it, probably going to sell it. If you want to know why, watch the last episode. And I'm looking to join the startup. And recently, I've also been spending a lot of time talking to actually my friends, my ex-colleagues who still in the consulting firm that I used to work for. And a lot of people just struggle to actually quit the job. Not because there's no options out there, quite the opposite. There's a lot of options out there, but a lot of the times their corporate job in consulting or banking just pays way too well for them to quit. They just can't justify quitting. So I thought it'd be cool for me to share my own story and my thoughts on this, because I reckon if you clicked into this, that's something you struggle with as well. It was 2 weeks before Christmas. I was taking the train down to London to do my final round interview at this consulting firm that I really want to work for. I was riding on 3 hours of sleep because I could barely sleep since it was my first ever final round interview, and it's at a place that I've been really wanting to get in. I did the interview at their London office, looking over at a gorgeous view in London, and I was just dreaming about working there. And at the end of the day, I walked out of the office with a champagne in my hand and an offer to join their office as a new strategy consultant in 1 year's time. That was genuinely one of the happiest days in my life, but I just couldn't expect what would happen afterwards. So a year went by, I started working there, and the first 6 months, everyone was pretty happy, I joined with a bunch of people. We're all around the same age, fresh out of college, all went to pretty similar universities, top universities, because that's how you get into consulting, right? And then we're all really hopeful, really driven. But I remember it was after the first Christmas break. Everyone came back, and then the mood just changed. It was people went away for a bit. They had some time to think about their life, and now all of a sudden people's a bit depressed, And then I started to think about quitting, right? I was lucky. I've saved up most of my salary during my first year in consulting, and I also had savings from before because I started investing when I was 17, 18. And also just random stuff during content creation, sponsorship deals here and there. So I have enough saved up. I decided to quit my job to actually not make any money, make negative money actually, by working on my own startup. And I think the reason why I was able to make that decision was a few folds. First of all, it was still pretty early into my consulting career, so I've not had a single salary raise. I've not had a single promotion. But if I were to think about where I would be if I did get the promotion, it would be so much harder for me to quit that job. And if I get promoted, which I would have been now if I stayed in the company, I would be making 70k this moment right now. And I just think to myself, would I still be able to quit my job if I was making 70k? And actually, when I look at my colleagues who are making 70k, they're struggling to quit because jobs out there just doesn't pay as good unless you go into even higher paying careers like private equity or other types of finance job, which can maybe match your salary. You're looking at maybe a 20-30% salary decrease if you go into corporate or maybe even startups. And there's this one phrase that people use to describe this phenomenon of people working in high paying jobs wanting to quit but not being able to quit. They call it the golden handcuffs. And that's so true, right? Because yes, you're handcuffed at this place, you can't quit, but they're also golden. They're paying you well. They're paying you good money to stay here. And I'm not here to persuade you to quit because that's your decision. But what I'm here to do is to give you more perspective on why you might consider quitting or why you might not. So even though when I quit I was only making 55k, I think this still applies. I think this still applies if you're making 70, 80, 90 or even 100. So the first way I think about it is to actually change the time bound or the perspective of your decision making. So instead of priming the decisions on how much you'll be making in the next 1 to 2 years, actually think about how much you want to be making in 10 years time and which decision makes more sense. For me, when I was working in consulting, in the short term, 1 to 2 years, maybe I'll make more if I stay in consulting. Maybe that way I'll be more ahead, because I'll be making 70k versus right now I'm making practically minimum wage. But when I think about where I want to be in 10 years, this actually primes me better and prepares me better to be making way more than how much I can make in 10 years if I stayed in consulting. And more importantly, I'll be a lot happier than if I just stayed in consulting, which is actually the more important thing here. It's a bit too bright. Okay, this is better. So when I look at people when I was in consulting and where they are in 10 years, I just can't see myself being there. Not in like a disrespectful way, but I just can't see myself doing what they're doing, and I don't think I'll be happy that way. So in a 10 years horizon, what would make me happy is if I can do what I love for work. Because if you love what you do, then you don't work a single day in your life. So that's like the first thing you can think about. Like, change your time horizon from the next 1 to 2 years to the next 10 years. What makes the most sense for you in 10 years time? And secondly, when you're making a decision on where they want to quit, actually think about like, do you want freedom from something or freedom to do something? This is something I read in the book, The Pathless Path by Paul Millett. Funny enough, he also worked in consulting. I think he worked in both McKinsey and BCG. That's how long it took him to realize that he actually just wanted to become a writer. So go read that book. But anyway, in that book, he differentiates 2 types of freedom. So most people, when they quit their job and when they say they want freedom from their current job. And once they got that freedom, they don't actually know what they want that freedom to do, right? And that's essentially a bit like me. Last year, when I quit consulting, I just wanted freedom away from consulting. I just don't want to have my 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on average, just bounded by this one job that I don't get fulfillment from. But after I quit, I realized I don't have a strong desire to do anything in particular. Yes, I did spend a lot of time learning coding and building AI startups, but that's not essentially why I quit my job. I quit my job because I wanted freedom from consulting instead of freedom to build AI startups. When making a decision, when trying to like motivate yourself to do something, you want to have both the carrot and the stick. The stick behind you might be the fact that you hate this job, you think it's really boring, but you also need some carrot. You need something in front of you where you can look forward to, something that, really drives you to strive toward. And thirdly, something I encourage you to do if you are thinking about whether you want to quit your job is to actually think about the worst case scenario. So a lot of people are scared of quitting because the future is uncertain, right? Because it's a black box. You don't know what's going to happen once you quit. You don't know if quitting is actually the right decision. This is a bit too bright. Let's switch around. Okay, this is better. So a lot of people, they don't know if quitting is the right decision. To that, I'll say you need to try make the uncertainty as clear and as concrete as possible. So when I quit my consulting job to build my own AI startup, I was very sure about the worst case, the most likely case, and the best case. So the worst case for me at the time was that I managed to learn nothing at all. I managed to do nothing at all, build nothing at all, got nothing to show for my 1 year of, building startups, and I just go back into consulting. That's the worst case. That's the absolute worst case, right? And I know, having worked at the firm that I worked at, it won't be too hard for me to get back into the industry. Maybe I can get into like an even better firm. Maybe I'll go back to the same firm, or maybe I can just go to a firm that's not as good as the first one I started at. But still, like, that risk is something I wanted to take for the potential upside, which is the most likely case is that I do build something, I build some concrete skill sets, as well as a startup project that I can very proudly show to people. That's like probably the most likely case, because going into this, I knew the possibility and the probability of being able to build a successful business in your first go, and I knew it wasn't that high. So for me, I've always been treating this as more like a training, a practice for the next 10 years, like I said. And the best case scenario here, which is something that probably has less than 5% chance of happening, is I built something really successful on my first go, and then basically just transformed my life, right? Like, I no longer need to worry about money, and I also really enjoy what I'm building, so I just continue doing that. That's the absolute best case scenario. And when you think about the best case, the moderate, most likely case, and also the worst case, this is actually a pretty good calculated risk that I'm willing to take, which is why I've been able to take it. But for a lot of people, when they think about quitting their job, they think of the uncertainty and they're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, fine. Then maybe you should actually take some time to articulate exactly what the worst case is, because a lot of the times when you do the exercise, they're not actually that scary. Again, I got this idea from, I think, Tim Ferriss. I think he called this the fear setting exercise. He gave a TED talk on this, so you can check it out. If not, you should also read his book, 4 Hour Work Week. That's one of the books that really impacted me the most when I read it, I think when I was about 18, 19. So definitely check those out.
I'm fly as fuck but still broke, I can't be mad at it. Mama always said I would be talented, I'm in the gym shooting.
Whilst we're still at it, here's a few more questions that really helped me decide if I want to quit my job. These are questions that literally make my head go, you know that meme? In terms of whether I should actually quit my job. So the first one is really interesting. This is like a decision-making framework almost. You should ask yourself, what would my 8-year-old self think of this? As well as what would my 80-year-old self think of this? Because a lot of the times, you are just you're living your life, you're in a daily routine, you're sort of like, you're used to it, right? And you need something that can snap you out of that sort of perspective. And in this case, your 8-year-old self will make sure that whatever you're choosing is fun and you're doing it not for a certain end, but almost as a means in and of itself. And I fundamentally believe that is so key in deciding what you want to do, because if you're going to hate what you're going to be doing, you can't do it for long enough and you won't be that good. But secondly, you also want to ask your 80-year-old self, because he's the version of you that's lived your whole life already. He knows you the best. He has all the wisdom, and he can tell you what you'll regret and what you'll not, right? Some people lay on their deathbed and they think about the risk that they didn't take. Other people lay on their deathbed thinking about the time they should have spent with their family. So when thinking about whether you should quit your job, ask yourself, would my 8-year-old self and my 80-year-old self both agree on this? And if so, then maybe it's time to take a plug. The second question I ask myself is, I love watching movies, right? And I love the feeling of being the protagonist, being the main character. So this is a question I got from, I think, Sahil Bloom or Joe Rogan. Or actually, both of them said the same thing, which is, imagine there's a documentary about your life, and there's a film crew following you around right now, this moment, in your room. Like there's a film crew with cameras filming you right now. What would you be doing? So I think that's Joe Rogan's version of the question. Sahil Bloom's version of the question is, imagine life is a movie playing in a cinema. What's the audience screaming at you to do? When you're in a movie cinema, you're watching a movie and you're like, why is the main character so stupid? So clearly he should be doing X or Y. Think of yourself as that character. What would the audience be screaming at you to do? That also gives me a lot of perspectives in terms of telling me that, okay, like, why am I still in this job that I hate? If I'm the main character, if this is a story about me, then surely I should be taking some form of action. And yeah, that also helped me a lot when I was thinking about whether to quit my job. So those two are just some more prompts you can use when thinking about whether you should actually quit your job. I mean, at the end of the day, it is your decision. I can only share with you my experience, and it is something that everybody have to sort of reflect and deal with themselves. But I hope this has been helpful. That's all I have for you today. I will be posting more. So with that being said, I'll see you next time. Peace.